Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. I want to start off today. Shout out to the folks over at the Bucks County Beacon. In their infinite wisdom, they decided that they were going to run a little story on the program because we're coming up on our 18th anniversary, 18 years of doing this little show and attempting to add balance and sanity to the radio airwaves. And it's hard to believe it's been 18 years since we started this little song and dance. And it really hit home for me today because Facebook does this thing. It reminds me of the stuff that I used to post when I used to use Facebook. And it was 12 years ago this day that we took our son to kindergarten. And there's just an incredible picture of my son sitting on my wife's lap in the kindergarten class. And, I remember that, that just, the pride, all that. He was just so darn cute. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. He was adorable. But, it made me think that, I've been doing this his entire life. Both he and the show have grown. He's becoming a man. We're growing the program bigger. It's one of those things that you just kind of step back and go, it's been a journey, and it's been a great journey. I was thinking about all the wonderful things that we were able to do over that 18-year period. I mean, we've done several Hungry and Homeless for the holiday events where we lived in a parking lot for 10 days to raise food and money for the homeless shelter and for the food banks, and the people that we met and the relationships that we built and all of that stuff. We've done several multi-state radio tours, marched on hundreds of picket lines. I got to sleep in the Capitol in Wisconsin for 2 weeks when the Act 10 uprising was going on. Just so much stuff. And, as I'm looking at the picture of my wife and my son, I go back to what my thought was of that day. Because, when you put yourself in a, you can remember what you were thinking, what you were feeling. And I remember in that moment as he walked off into what was going to be his education and his future and his, this wonderful experience for him. I remember just, this feeling of the world is open for him, that he's going to have every opportunity that I never had. And, part of what I've done over the 18 years of doing this show is, fighting to make his path and his sister's path a little bit better, a little bit brighter, a little bit easier. And not just for my kids, but for everyone. And this is, I come back to the original reason when we started this program. The message that we get so often in the mainstream corporate controlled media is all one-sided. I mean, we've been trained like Pavlovian dogs for decades to care about business. Wall Street, got to care about Wall Street. No one gives a tinker's damn about Main Street. And when we've done these radio tours and we've gone out and we've talked to people and you get the opportunity to connect with people, not red hat, blue hat nonsense, but actual, hey, what's important to you? That picture, that's important to me. That kid's education, what he's done the last, 12 years. That's important stuff, not just to me, but to every parent. And I guess I was a little nostalgic, a little weepy-eyed, although I'm not that emotional. It made me think of the fight that's yet ahead. Because what we've been trained to do is we've been trained to get in our camps. And I've said 1,000 times, we got to get past this red hat, blue hat stuff, get a hard hat on and get back to building, because there's so much for his future, so much for that kid sitting in that kindergarten class today, their future that isn't being addressed. Whatever Wall Street wants, Wall Street gets. Whatever Main Street, well, sorry. And education being a big part of that. So as I'm looking around and I'm watching all this outrage being fed to us, all of this anger being fed to us, all this stuff that's meant to keep us pitted together. And this isn't new. Look, 18 years ago when I started this, that was part of it. I remember the day when I said, we should start a radio program. You got to compete with the Limbaughs, because I look at all my truck driver buddies. They're all spewing what Limbaugh is saying to them, which is, you're an individual. Hooray for you. You'd make more money if you didn't have to belong to that stinking union. And I literally had people tell me that. And then when I would ask a simple question of, well, where's that happening? And then why aren't you there? It kind of made them go, oh, I didn't actually think of that. Because what the right has understood masterfully, and why they've taken over talk radio and cable news, most people learn by osmosis. You keep hammering the big lie long enough, be it in employment, be it in politics, be it in anything, people are going to buy into it. If you see my email box every day, I know what the right-wing talk shows are talking about before I even turn them on, because my emails are filled up with all of their conspiracy theories. And it's not about making lives better. This is the part that really gets me. It's not about taking on real problems. It's about perceived ones. It's about made up stuff. It's about stuff that, well, just makes you mad. And one of the things that we've prided ourselves here, and in the article, and a guy who used to work for me, said, hey, look, all the things that Biden is doing, Rick's been advocating for years, for 10, 15 years. And this is why I've been telling you, he is literally killing it from my point of view. Because all of the things that we need to do to rebuild and revive and increase the working class prosperity of this country, this guy's doing. Sleepy Joe's doing the job. And yet all we get is more outrage, is more anger, because they can't attack the policies, because they're going to work. They can't attack what's happening because it's working. So they have to attack the person. Now, my frustration in all this is we fall for it. And this is where, I go back to this period when we began this little program. It had been over a decade of hooray for me, hyper-individualism. Greed is good. The one who dies with the most toys wins. Look, internalize that as a kid. But actually saw what happens when that is allowed to fester. And you have an entire society of people who are just eating each other. Which is why the other day I again asked the question, which are you first? Are you a worker or are you a consumer? Because that's a very telling, very simple question. Because I tell you, the guy who says greed is good, the one with the most toys when he dies wins, that guy's a consumer first. And the more I think about where we are in this country, the more I'm firmly in the camp of the original thoughts of when we started this. They're still valid today and needed even more than they were back then. So for me, there's opportunity here. There's really, again, people who've listened know I'm not a great optimist. I tend to be a little jaded. But there's a chance here to make something really happen. And, I wanted to start today off by just going, look, it's been 18 years. There have been a lot of people along the way who have helped in incredible ways. A lot of our union brothers and sisters who have helped fund the program. There's still more to come. The reality is we've grown to a position that I could have never imagined when I just, blurted out, well, we should probably start a radio program, without actually understanding anything. And the learning experience that this has been incredible. But I come back to, it's the people that we've met, the stories that people have shared, and how it's enriched, honestly, I hope it's enriched our audience's lives. I hope it's made, people think a little differently, hope a little more, dream a little more. But it's changed. It's made me a better person. It's made me more thoughtful and more interested in community. We're at a moment right now where, again, I go back to that frame of, are you a worker first or are you a consumer? And really, it comes back to: Are you in the hyper individualist camp, or are you in the part of we can build a community? Yeah, I know the right loves to beat up on Hillary Clinton with the frame of it takes a village, but it does. Are you part of a community that wants to make tomorrow better? And for me, that's what all this is about. So I want to thank the good folks over at the Bucks County Beacon for taking some time to publish a story on the little program and share some thoughts on that. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Got a lot to get to, but right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, a perfect example of right-wing outrage machine. And you know, I'm always amazed at how the right wing is able to, to kind of, spin their outrage, feed you the red meat that that's going to get you all lathered up and all bunched up in the panties and angry, and then literally to go out and try and sell you meat. I saw this clip, and I got to play this because it's quite interesting and quite remarkable. There's this woman, a Gen Z woman. What they're calling the clip says it's a female version of Ben Shapiro, and she's over at the Daily. I think it's the Daily Wire, which is Shapiro's thing. But they got this young woman who's doing the right wing outrage and talking about COVID and how making all this, just making stuff up, pulling it out of some orifice. I'm not gonna guess, but I love the twist at the end. This is the part. Got to be honest. This is the part that really makes me laugh. So, let me play this. Here's the Gen Z girl from the Daily Wire.
Health and for our own good, of course. Lionsgate is the big one that's doing that. Hollywood bringing back mask mandates. Lionsgate Studios, which makes Saw and Hunger Games franchises, asks office staff to don face coverings and test again as COVID hospital rates rise for the 5th week.
Oh, no. Here we go again.
You guys know what this means. 14 days, only 14. We're just precautionary. Again, we have been there before. We know what that means. 2 weeks to slow the spread. We've done that. We don't want to do it again. And of course, they're going to tell us that it's good for us. It's not good for you. What is actually good for you is a good rancher steak. That is what you should be eating. That is what you should be focusing on. And I'm not just talking about your health. Financially, Good Ranchers is the healthy option. Health.
I love how they spun that. I love how she spun it there. They're going to tell you that it's good for your health to do whatever to stay away from COVID. Because guess what? COVID numbers are going up. I'm sure you've seen the stories, and there have been a bunch of them. But so you've got your outrage. Oh, they're going to come for you again. They're going to make you do all this stuff, and to get the crazy all lathered up, and then they've got them outraged. Fed them the red meat, and then comes the hey, buy red meat. Hey, here, buy this. it's understand all of this stuff is about lining their pockets. They need outrage to keep you stuck, glued, tuned in, so that you can line their pockets. But I find that just, well, it's typical. It is what you get from the right wing. It reminds me, I was listening to Glenn Beck one day, and he was talking about his dead brother, and somehow figured out how to weave in a lawnmower and buying lawnmowers off of his dead brother, which is bizarre to me. But this is what's happened over the 40 years. And again, I come back to when I started this. I didn't want to be that kind of, I don't know, there's a word for that. I'm actually not going to go there. I'm not going to use the word, the oldest profession word. Not going to do it. We're going to move along. Hey, did you know Joe Biden's taking the short stairs? Yeah, big headline. Joe Biden takes short stairs. I wish our media would just go, hey, Joe Biden's old. I wish they would be honest. Be honest. Say, he's an old guy. He's old. Every day there's something. He's taking naps. He's whatever. Evidently, there are 18 rickety steps that go up to Air Force One. They're not the sturdiest. So the guy has made the decision to not put himself in a situation where how old is he? He's 80 years old, to maybe not fall and break a hip. Somehow this is bad. Somehow this is, I don't actually know. I don't know if this is supposed to be a sign of weakness. I don't know what this is supposed to be, but the message is clear. And the weird part of this, and this is where my mind goes, I don't know if this is palace intrigue. I don't know if this is coming from in the House, or if this is the right-wing spin machine just looking for one more thing, or it's a combination of both. Because simultaneously, while we're seeing all this Joe Biden's old stuff, and he's 80 years old, we're also seeing a push for Gretchen Whitmer and Raphael Warnock, which would not be a bad ticket. Let me be very clear. Not against the idea of a Warnock or a Whitmer Warnock ticket at all. Problem is we've got a sitting president, an incumbent president, who is doing everything that I have wanted a president to do on the labor front for all 18 years of doing this work. So I got to tell you, I'm not ready to give up on Joe just yet. And I think working people shouldn't be either. The reality in this situation is, especially the last couple of weeks, with the stuff coming out of the Labor Department, this is a big deal. We're at a big moment. Now, you also have the media reports. Liberals are calling on Biden to sharpen his re-election pitch. I'm one of those people saying, you got to get out there and toot your own horn. And be a little Trump-like. I sat and I thought about this for a couple of minutes before showtime when I was looking at the story of, he needs to sharpen his pencil. That could go in a whole different direction. I started thinking about the accomplishments that this administration has had. And for me, they're historic. This is a sea change. This is a radical change, and should be one of these moments where you reach out to the red hats and go, look, this is what you wanted. I was talking to someone today and I said, look, had Donald Trump listened to me in 2017, had he not gone on the crazy meltdown, bizarre path that he went, had he not pursued the tax breaks, had he not gone after the Affordable Care Act, had he not done all of the vengeance and all the petulant stuff that he did, had he not had his temper tantrums in public and followed the simple stuff that Biden has done, had he accomplished this stuff, he would have been unbeatable. And I know my liberal friends are going to lose their mind over that, but the reality is, had he done what he said he was going to do, if you remember, when he ran, he was talking about a $3 trillion infrastructure package. Biden has gotten a historic $1.2 trillion infrastructure package. Imagine something almost 3 times that large. He was talked about bringing manufacturing back. Had he done any of that, Biden is bringing manufacturing back. Factories are being built. There is a boom happening. Had he done any of that, he'd been unbeatable. And can you imagine? This is the part that I want to get to. Can you imagine what Trump would be saying if he did any of this? Can you imagine the promotion, the PR, and the self-congratulations, and the pats on the back, and the, hey, look at me's? Can you imagine? Got to get some of that. Let's go to the phones. Got Steve in Chicago on line 1. Steve, how are you?
Yes, hello?
Yep, what's on your mind, brother?
Yes, so I want to make a couple of points, and I think you're absolutely right with regard to what Democrats sort of need to internalize when running for office, especially for the highest office in the land. You know, politics today is showmanship. When you look at the research, the soundbite in terms of what people say who are in public office has declined precipitously over the last 30 years. So in other words, you have to say something quick and edgy and to the point. And I know, people want to believe that public policy and politics is some sort of university seminar. It's not. The average person doesn't know very much. It doesn't have much of an attention span, and you've got to be succinct and to the point. And what Democrats are not very good at is getting the message across to their voters and independents and others that, this is what we've accomplished and this is what we're going to give you. And doing it in a very direct, straightforward way, as opposed to a graduate level political science seminar, which all too many people want to have. And I understand that, having come from that background, I think it was a weakness of Hillary Clinton and a number of other Democrats in that, again, you need just to be direct. You need, in Joe Biden's case, you need to be able to walk out there on the stage and say, this is what we've done. We're taking a bow. Yes, we're the ones who did it for you. We fulfilled our promises, and this is why you need to turn out and vote for us again. I think that one of the mistakes that the Obama administration made was, quite frankly, being too collegiate, rather than saying to the world, you know what, this is what we did for you. We promised you reform in terms of health care in this country, and we delivered on that. And instead, it was just, we passed it. Great, we took a bow. And we'll see what happens with it. No, you get out there every week and you pound that into the American psyche. This is what we've done for you. These are the benefits that are going to manifest themselves down the road for you. And that's exactly what happened. Nobody going forward is running against the Affordable Care Act. Nobody in their right mind, because the Republicans knew back in 2008 that if we managed to get it passed, the longer it was in place, the less likely you were going to be able to get anybody to repeal it.
Yep.
Because there's nothing in there that you would want to repeal unless you're insane. If you're a billionaire, sure, maybe. But beyond that, why in heaven's name would anyone want to repeal it? Much of it benefits middle-class people, upper-middle-class people. If you've got a couple of kids at Harvard and Stanford, you're paying quite a bit to send them there. You know what? You get to keep them on your health insurance plan until they graduate. So, there's all sorts of things in there that benefit all of us. There isn't a maximum in terms of lifetime benefit. Again, this is not about poor people. So, yeah, we need to do a better job of messaging.
Absolutely.
And, again, being straightforward about that message.
There you go. Steve, appreciate the call, man. Spot on. Absolutely. Good stuff. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1864. That was the day the final battle of the Atlanta campaign began with the Battle of Jonesboro. The Union had been embroiled in a civil war with Confederate forces to end the slave labor system for 3.5 years. It had been a difficult summer. Battles were increasingly bloody, with casualties on both sides numbering into the tens of thousands. Criticisms intensified against key Union generals like Sherman and Grant. Pressure mounted against President Lincoln to end the war and withdraw the Emancipation Proclamation if necessary. General William T. Sherman mounted the Atlanta campaign earlier that year in May. His forces scored a number of victories throughout the summer, but could not decisively defeat Confederate forces. By August, Northern morale was so low that the Republican National Committee deemed Lincoln unelectable. The Democratic National Convention, convening in Chicago, had declared the war a failure and planned to ride to victory over Lincoln in the November elections. But Lincoln's commitment to emancipation was unwavering, and Sherman did not disappoint. He understood that Atlanta was, as historian Eric Foner describes it, a key railroad hub and the communications and transportation center for the entire Southeast. Sherman's forces had been marching down from Chattanooga for most of the summer. Finally, they marched to the south of Atlanta to cut the last key rail line. And on this day, Union forces positioned themselves at the Flint River and at the Macon and Western Railroad. Over the next 2 days, they would successfully beat back multiple Confederate assaults, destroying the rail line and forcing Confederate forces to abandon Atlanta. The city was now fully under Union occupation.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
The people are revolting, in the very best meaning of that word. An inspiring example of people rising up against a trifecta of economic, cultural, and political oppression has just come to us from a community of seemingly powerless people living in a very isolated place. Long exploited, lied to, disrespected, and robbed, they revolted, daring to take on the biggest, richest, most politically connected industrial power on the globe, Big Oil. Astonishingly, after a decade of protesting, organizing, coalition building, suing, petitioning, and otherwise resolutely rebelling against injustice, these tenacious people just won an inspiring grassroots victory over Big Oil profiteering. One reason you probably haven't heard about it is that it didn't happen in any of the usual centers of media focus, but in the Amazonian rainforest of Ecuador. Also, this revolt was not led by some brand-name environmental group or charismatic political honcho, but by the Tagari and Taro-Manani tribes and other indigenous Warani people living in the rich biodiversity of Ecuador's Usani National Park. Directly challenging the exigent crisis of climate change, the Warani rallied the region's young people into a potent political force. They successfully organized behind a national referendum to 1. Ban oil drilling in the region, 2. Compel the profiteers to remove their wells and pipelines, and 3. Pay for remediation and reforestation. Significantly, they specifically called for leaving oil in the ground so it would not add to climate destruction. And the proposed ban was binding, unable to be overturned by future lobbyists and officials. This is Jim Hightower saying a resounding 58% of Ecuadorians said yes. As a Warani leader noted, this is the day the planet started to win.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Nebraska, the governor of Nebraska, a guy named Jim Pillen, I think it's how you pronounce it, Pillen, P-I-L-L-E-N, evidently signed an executive order. You're going to narrowly define what the definition of a male and female is, and it's going to be based solely on biological sex. And again, this is one of those weird things. Do we need this? Does this rise to the level of the governor signing an executive order? And then, I got to be honest, it comes back to how you got to check. And then the other part, who cares? Why is this something we care about? I clearly don't. But here to share some thoughts on, well, the Nebraska governor and all of the other craziness we can get to. I've asked our good friend Sarah Burris to come talk with us. She's a reporter over at Raw Story. RawStory.com is the website. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, happy Thursday.
So what do you think? You got the governor here weighing in on the culture war. I guess this is like the minimum entry into the Republican world.
I guess maybe this is just his attempt at trying to get some extra money from national groups, maybe. One of the things that I noticed this week is that James Comer has raised 4 times as much money now that he is going after Joe Biden than he did the last time he was in Congress. So, maybe this is just like the way that you get noticed. It's good for business.
Name recognition. So you got me to butcher his name. Okay, I got it.
Yeah. Pilsner, Pillmeister, Pilstein.
Pillheimer. I don't know.
Something
Pill
like
in,
that.
pill out.
Some dude.
Pill over.
But the question I have for this dude is, who is defining this? Like, he keeps saying biologically, like, does that mean that you're going to have an actual, person who is a scientist who defines this?
No. They're going to set up curtain rooms and we're going to do checks because again, these people seem to have this fetish of what's under people's clothing. I personally don't care. I don't. I really, this is one of those issues that to me, I 8th grade, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Pursue your happiness. Do whatever you got to do. As long as it doesn't infringe on my right to be happy, I don't care.
I do not want to see your genitals. I really don't.
Wow.
Like, I really don't. Like, it's just not my thing. It's not my jam. No criticism to people who are into that.
So
but,
me or anyone?
I'm fine with the ones I got.
Okay, good.
Mine and the boy.
So no show and tell? We can't do this in school then?
No. Please,
because
for the
there's
love
part
of
of me
God.
that goes, this is where these folks want to take this.
That's what I think. I mean, that's the only logical conclusion, right?
Yeah.
Like, why else would you guys be so obsessed with this unless you wanted to start looking at people's wieners or lack thereof?
I look at Matt Schlapp.
Dude, for real, that dude
with a name like Schlapp.
With a name like Schlapp, and now, so he had these allegations from a younger, superior. Less superior. I mean, I guess he was the superior to the employee, and now he's got a second complaint. So I guess they're just stacking up. Complaints are stacking up for him with young boys.
And this is the weird thing. I mean, this is the party of anti-LGBT, anti-T.
Yep.
All this stuff. And again, I come back to it, and I've been attacked by the left for saying I don't care, because I don't. I want to get to a place where this is no longer a conversation, where it's just you're going to be whoever you're going to be, and God bless you.
Yeah.
And we move forward. I don't want to know, like you said, I don't want to know what you got going on. I don't care. What I want to make sure is everyone's got an opportunity to make a good living, put a roof over their head, put food on the table, lead that American dream life. That's what I care about.
To me, it's really just about being polite, and it's the hospitality aspect of it. Like, tell me your name. Yep. If I get your pronoun right or wrong, tell me, and then I'll adjust accordingly. Like, it's just about being a polite human being to another human being.
Just being decent. And it doesn't cost you anything to be decent. This is the
really doesn't
part of that.
It is, and I don't know how anybody who grows up in the South, hasn't had that already hammered into their head.
Right.
I mean, that is the thing that just kills you, is like, I have this weird need every time somebody comes over to be like, can I get you anything? Do you need anything? Can I make you something? Are you hungry? Can I make you cookies? Do you need some turkey? What do you need?
What kind of cookies do you make?
Actually, it's funny. My mother just sent me an overnight box of chocolate chip cookies that she baked. Right. True story.
Because if you're going to say oatmeal raisin, I'm on the way over.
She made them with oat flour.
Okay, I'm a big oatmeal raisin fan. So it
has an oaty flavor to it,
right.
But yeah. So we put ice cream between them, two of them.
Nice. Now I'm hungry. Now I'm ready to go. I'm ready to pack it in for the day.
Right.
And maybe have a beer with it. Because evidently, have you seen the new scandal? The new scandal is that evidently Ted Cruz tweeted it out. Evidently, because he says kisses behind if you think he's only drinking 2 beers. Where'd this come from? Where'd this 2 beer thing come from? I know that idiot Ducey over at Fox asked the question at one of the press conferences, but where did this come from? What orifice did they pull this out of?
I have no clue. I really have no idea, which is funny because remember who went after the beer company? Remember the big fight over where they were trying to ban Miller Lite or something, Bud Light, some subpar beer. I've heard. I'm not a beer drinker, but I hear that the craft beer is the way to go. So yeah, it's Steve Ducey asked it at the press briefing, and Karine Jean-Pierre, bless her, was just like, I'm sorry, what? Where are you getting this stuff? And
see, but the reason I bring this up, and the reason that, because I was talking about right-wing outrage, because the outrage machine spins these tales, where I'll bet there's a small kernel of reality to this, where some agency somewhere said, hey, you know what? It might be beneficial for your health to limit your alcohol intake, to 2 beers a week. That might be good for you. And they take this to the next place. Oh, they're going to impose this. They're coming, the alcohol czar. What did he say? Hold on. Why does Biden have an alcohol czar? What is it with liberals that want to control every aspect of your lives? If they want us to drink 2 beers, they can kiss my... And you go, I want you to drink more. I want you to drink so much that you don't get up.
I would love to have him drink as many as he possibly could consume on the Senate floor.
Yeah.
I think that would be really helpful for C-SPAN viewership. But also, you remember the old like health recommendations where they're like, a glass of red wine at dinner is really good for you or something. It helps fight whatever the hell. Maybe you're right. Maybe that's this sort of thing where somebody's like, oh, hey, this is good. This is bad. This is, maybe you shouldn't be having 5 beers a night.
No, the way I see this is them because their frame is government wants to control you. And government puts out information all the time that says, hey, this is what our research shows. Because we do a lot of research. Scientists look into a lot of things and publish a lot of stuff. They take that kernel that says, maybe you shouldn't drink more than 2 beers, especially if you've got any type ailments or whatever, or on medicine or whatever. And then they just extrapolate to that. They're going to control everyone's life. And if you're a drunken idiot, they're coming for you. And it's that kind of fear-based media that is, as I believe, really ripped us apart.
It is. And I feel like it every single week, it's a new thing.
Yeah.
Like they're just going to invent something
every
new.
Week?
Right?
It's like every day there's something crazy. Like Joe Biden's got secret emails. Did you know he was doing nefarious things with those secret emails? Yeah, like checking on his dying son.
Yeah, the thing that blows me away with that is they found 5,000 emails where Joe Biden is referred to in another way other than his name. Well, what's interesting is that typically when you work for a politician, typing out their name is sort of silly. So you just put their initials. So one of the things in the search term was JRB, which is how a bunch of his staff refers to him.
Right.
So some of these are so ridiculously silly. I can't understand why, this is their obsession. But again, they're trying desperately to find something that they can hang around his neck because the Ukraine stuff is just not working.
Yeah.
Nobody is buying any of this.
And the woke stuff isn't working either. The attack on woke isn't happening either. So they're having to figure out which way they're going here. But, it's interesting to me that the people who are attacking Biden for doing this are the same people defending the guy who used to go by John Barron.
Yeah, that's the funny part. Remember when he used to do John Barron? There was another name that he did too before Barron. I can't remember what it was. But yeah, this is the dude who he used to, what was it? He used to call the New York Times or Fortune magazine or something and pretend to be this press secretary when actually it was Donald Trump the whole time. And everybody's
how can you not know it's him with that stupid voice? How can you?
And I think there's actually recordings of it, so you can hear it, and you're just like, "Who is this fooling?"
Hello, this is Donald Trump.
Right?
This is John
This
Barron
is not
for
Donald Trump. I'm absolutely not Donald Trump. Absolutely not.
It's crazy.
Oh Lord.
I mean, here's the part that bothers me though. You can't make this up. This is what gets me. And look, my email box is full of stories every day from people going, see this, and it's all of this fabricated outrage designed to keep us at each other's throat so that we don't talk about how to make lives better. And look, I look at the word salad, video collage that was yesterday. Trump did 31 video posts in 5 hours. Let's talk about mental breakdown. Did you watch any of these? Because I got to be honest, I saw 31. I got time for this.
I know. I watched oh gosh, I lost track of how many I watched, because it wasn't like they were posted all at once. They were sort of posted over time. So I'd like see one and then I'd see another one. And then I watched probably the first, like, what, half dozen. And it, to me, it sort of caught me as he basically stood in front of the camera and just started rambling for a long time. And there was just so much insanity that the campaign went through and just cut it into little manageable chunks, because there was just like weird stuff in between.
It's crazy.
I mean, that's the only thing I can think.
He was ranting about Russia. He was ranting about Ukraine. And then he went into fascism, socialism, communism, Marxism. And I'm like, did I catch a niner in there? I mean, you know,
they're all the same thing. Like, that's the thing that blows me away. It's like, dude, these are all conflicting ideologies. I'm so disturbed by the fact that you don't know this as somebody who was a president of the United States. But again,
we can't do all of them at once.
Yeah, you really can't. I mean, I guess you could try, but you'd be opposing yourself. So,
but the weird thing is you would be amazed at how many times someone emails me and puts all that stuff in there and accuses me of being all of them, and I'm going, how can I be a communist and a fascist? How is that? How is it going to be a socialist, a communist, fascist, Marxist, anarchist? How can I be? I don't know.
See, and I mean, I get the same thing, except they also tack on that I'm a hoe and like all of this other stuff. And you're just like, dude, like, there's this one dude who's been emailing me off and on for like, when I was on vacation in Europe, the dude was emailing me like every other day. So I was living rent free in this guy's head for weeks while I was gallivanting around Spain and Italy. And it's just sort of like, wow, do you really have nothing else in your life? And the truth is, no, they really don't. But I think you're spot on. Like, this is to keep us fighting with each other, so we're not asking questions like, why am I not paid better? Why am I not getting better wages? It's Labor Day, so clearly, these are questions that we all should be asking, and we're not, because we're too busy fighting over 2 beers a week or a day or whatever.
You listen to the Rick Smith Show with Sarah Burris. Sarah's a reporter over at Raw Story, rawstory.com, the website, if you want to check out her work. As you said, Labor Day is coming on, and I want to pivot here because I got to tell you, I think Biden is killing it. The reality is, all the stuff coming out of the NLRB, all the stuff coming out of the Labor Department, raising the threshold for salary exemptions, speeding up union elections, the CMEX decision, all of this stuff going to help working people do incredible things in the future, I believe. I'm curious, any thoughts on what we're seeing coming out of the administration at this moment?
I mean, it's unbelievable because it's that kind of stuff, but because of the transportation package, you're talking about the building trades are getting a ridiculous amount of contracts. A lot of those workers are being put back to work after the shutdown, bringing back all of this manufacturing, whether it's the semiconductors, funding the EVs that are made within the United States is helping, bring more, manufacturing being, with the cars being built here. So it really is just this ridiculous amount of long-term investment in jobs in the country. And these are union jobs. These are good paying jobs where you have rights at your job. You have healthcare, you have, the ability to fight for your wages, with your union. And it's just like, man, this is the kind of stuff where I feel like we wished Barack Obama could have done this, but there's no way that he could have done it because they were too busy trying to find his birth certificate. And it's like while they were too busy fighting about beer, Biden just sort of like slipped under there and was like, oh, hey, we're going to start paying everybody better. Bye.
No, but here's the thing, and this is where I'm not giving Obama a pass. Sorry. You kind of gave him that, and I'm not. He could have done something. And look,
he could have.
I understand. We had tan suit gate and the Muslim prayer rug gate and terrorist fist bump gate and all of the craziness that Fox and they came out with. To do the same thing to Obama that they're trying to do to Biden. And I get it. This is their MO, and they're very good at it. But he could have done more. Look, I tell this story all the time. I shook that man's hand twice. He looked me in the eye, said, we're going to get the Employee Free Choice Act and something better, and we got zero out of it.
Yeah.
And again, but this isn't new for Democrats. I go back to Clinton. The only reason I voted for Clinton in 92 was because he promised strike replacement. Bob Dole filibustered it, and then they just let it die. I didn't get to vote in the Carter era. I'm not that old. But he also said, hey, we're going to undo Taft-Hartley. So every Democrat of my lifetime has said, hey, we're going to make labor rights better. We're going to do something. There's one guy who's actually done it. And that's the old guy who's not walking up the big steps anymore. And I say we keep the old guy.
Right? I mean, especially given the fact that there are a hell of a lot older people that are, having some serious problems. But I think the thing about Joe Biden is, a lot of these other candidates didn't come from that world, maybe. And with Biden, like, the first people that came to support him were the firefighters, right? Like, that's that story that he tells all the time about when he first ran for office. Those were the guys that stepped up to him, for him. And so labor has been supportive of him for a long time. And I mean, it seems sort of to me like he's kind of just saying, like, you were with me, I'm paying you back. Like, I'm getting you back this time because everybody else has screwed us over. But bless him for it.
Look, for me, I think he, in this moment, is exactly what the country needs. We needed somebody who was going to calm us down. We needed someone who was just going to show up and do the job. As I say, look, Jelly Bucket Joe is just coming to work. I do wish he would, be a little more, hey, look at what I did. I wish he would be a little more Trump-like and promoting things that he actually did. As I said a minute ago before you came on, can you imagine if Trump had any of the accomplishments that Biden has had? Can you imagine the amount of self-congratulations and hey, look at me that would come out of that guy?
I mean, he'd be doing a press conference every other day talking about, like, with a flow chart, talking about all the things that he's done. And you're right. It is Biden just sort of like going down his to-do list, and being like, all right, what's next?
Doing the work.
And I respect that.
I respect it too. And that's why I'm riding with Biden. I'm going to steal that frame back from them. But hey, Labor Day last, any plans?
I'm off. So I'm excited. I don't know. I don't know what we're going to do. We haven't even talked about it.
It's going to be our 18th anniversary. We've been doing this little program. 18 years, kicked off Labor Day of 2005. Labor Day special. For everyone who's listening, we're taking Labor Day off because it is a celebration day for us. But yeah, it's been a good 18 years, I got to tell you.
Have 2 beers.
I may. I have 2 in my refrigerator. There you go. And I'll tell Ted Cruz all about it.
There you go.
Wow. But Sarah, I appreciate the time. Have a good holiday. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. Happy Labor Day, everybody.
Our good friend Sarah Burris. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2.
On this day in labor history, the year was 1921. That was the day the Battle of Blair Mountain raged in Logan County, West Virginia. Members of the United Mine Workers of America were attempting to organize the minefields in the southern part of the state. The efforts to bring workers to union was met with violent resistance. The miners armed themselves and marched south. As many as 10,000 miners joined the march. They met armed company men at Blair Mountain. In the battle that ensued, 1 million rounds were fired. The mine owners even hired private planes to drop bombs on Union miners. The U.S. Army intervened and the battle ended. Despite not being successful in their march, the bloody battle brought national attention to the violence in the coal fields. But that was not the last battle for Blair Mountain. In 2011, there was a proposal to bring mountaintop removal mining to Blair Mountain. This type of mining blasts off large chunks of a mountain surface to get at the coal seams below. Protesters stood against the proposal. They argued it would be environmentally devastating to the area. They also argued that it would blast away one of the most important sites of labor history in the nation. Some coal miners took exception to the protests.
In a CNN documentary on the conflict, one union miner said, quote, "Mountaintop removal is what built this house, sends that little girl to school, provides insurance for my wife." But another miner joined in the protest against removal. He told CNN that miners had been, quote, "brainwashed to think, oh, I can't have a job unless it's a mountaintop removal job." In 2014, the state prohibited surface mining at Blair Mountain. For now, but that is subject to change. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So, Saudi Arabia, this is, again, I look at my Ted Cruz's of the world, I look at the rise of Christian nationalism, and as I've said before, there's a group of folks who would love to see Christian Sharia law here at home, put people in their place. But I saw this story from Saudi Arabia that evidently a guy who, in his mid-50s, was tweeting or Xing, or however you're going to put that, mostly retweeting criticism of the government, and Mr. Bonesaw, Mohammed bin Salman, not very happy with that. So he was arrested and I guess convicted. He's sentenced to death for his tweets. Sentenced to death. Now here's the part that caught my attention. I go, look, it's Saudi Arabia. They kill people all the time for minor things. You stole food out of the thing, chopping off a hand. Criticizing the government, I guess, is going to get you a death penalty. The problem that I have with this is this father of 7 in his mid-50s was retweeting with stuff with 10 followers. He had 10 followers over 2 anonymous accounts that he read. 10 followers. So basically the stuff that he was retweeting and saying, nobody saw except the government. And this is where, I love my right-wing friends who point at Joe Biden and point at all this stuff. I'm not seeing them coming after people for tweeting hate stuff at the administration. And this is where I caution the hyper-religion. I caution this push towards authoritarianism that we see coming with Trump. If you watch some of these videos, some of these weird, bizarre rants, and the credit that he wants to take for things that, sorry, I'm just not buying, it's frightening. And I guess what is scary to me on a much larger level is people are influenced by this guy. Millions of people, watched these videos. There's something unhinged, something wrong there. And my concern is always that we end up in this place where you end up with a right-wing authoritarian. We end up with what the right believes Joe Biden is. We end up with everything that they're projecting onto the Democrats. Because understand, in their mind, they see what they want, and they fear that it's happening to them. Because, of course, that kind of stuff can't happen to them. It's got to be them doing something to someone else. And I'll finish this with Joe Biggs, Proud Boy leader, convicted of seditious conspiracy. May remember it. Remember, heard the story? Federal government was seeking 33 years in prison. He got 17 years. Broke down in tears because he's not going to be able to see his daughter go to school. And my mind is, well, maybe, possibly, should have thought of that before doing the stuff that you did. What was that old, I guess I'm going to show my age here. What was it, Beretta? Don't do the crime if you can't do the time. Good luck in prison. Quick break, right back.
We've never had the combination of record warm oceans plus very strong developing El Nino event in recorded history.
Hurricane Hillary makes history as new storms brew in the record hot Atlantic. Panama Canal crippled by severe drought, plus Ecuador votes to protect the Amazon rainforest and keep oil in the ground.
Keep it in the ground. All of those stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
And it was only a few days ago before we all walked into one of the most significant weather events of our lives, something that makes meteorologists. Many meteorologists can pinpoint an event that was just so off the charts that drew them into this field, and this was Tropical Storm Hillary.
Okay, now we're getting a little pornographic. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, are you as excited about Hurricane Hillary as that guy was?
Well, Hurricane Hillary was a truly historic storm.
Yes, it was.
As we go to air, Southern California is drying out and cleaning up from historic Hurricane Hillary, which spun up fast in the unusually warm Pacific Ocean, rapidly intensified to a powerful Category 4 storm in just 24 hours, making landfall on Mexico's Baja California Peninsula over the weekend before becoming the first tropical storm to hit California since 1939.
And exciting Ariel Cohen of the National Weather Service, apparently.
Yep. Tons of rainfall records broken, especially in mountain and desert areas like Palm Springs Valley, which was hit by nearly a year's worth of rain in a day, overwhelming its stormwater infrastructure. Hillary triggered unprecedented flash floods and mudslides that severely damaged transportation infrastructure across Southern California. But there were no reports of deaths or major injuries in the U.S.,
thus allowing me to have a big laugh at it all, I guess.
AccuWeather released a preliminary estimate of the total economic losses and damages from Tropical Storm Hillary in the western U.S., putting it at $7 to $9 billion.
Okay, less funny.
Climate scientists say man-made climate change turbocharged Hillary's rapid intensification, its historic track into California, and its torrential rainfall impact.
Okay, definitely less funny.
And it's not just Hillary. The sleepy Atlantic hurricane season has suddenly lurched into life with a string of new tropical storms suddenly brewing all at once, which experts say is especially unusual during a developing El Nino in the Pacific Ocean. Climate scientists say record hot water temperatures in the Atlantic are providing fuel to sustain storms as hurricane season reaches its peak in September. Severe drought is backing up the Panama Canal. The drought has caused a drop in water levels in the shipping channel, which is filled by 2 freshwater lakes. Canal operators have reduced loads and crossings this summer, with more than 200 ships on both sides of the canal waiting to pass through. Maritime transportation experts warn such events could become the new normal, with rainfall deficits affecting the ocean shipping industry that moves nearly 80% of global trade.
That as well is going to end up costing billions and billions of dollars, it would seem.
In Canada's historic 2023 wildfire season, firefighters are still battling massive fires that forced the mass evacuation of Yellowknife, the capital of the Northwest Territories, in Canada's worst fire season on record. British Columbia has declared a state of emergency due to the fires. Officials now warn that Canada's fires could last not just through the fall, but into winter. UCLA climate scientist Dr. Daniel Swain on the broadcast said that while scientists accurately predicted the rate of man-made global warming that we're seeing today, they underestimated its impacts on ecosystems and human systems, which are more intense and arriving earlier than expected. And that means society hasn't yet come to terms about what it all actually means for the world we live in.
Given that we're continuing to warm on this roughly linear track, but even if it stays relatively linear, the impacts won't be. And we're starting to see things, the limits of our adaptability already, and it's only going to get harder with additional warming.
But there is some good news. India has approved a $7 billion plan to build and deploy 10,000 new all-electric buses in nearly 200 cities to cut local air pollution and emissions, and officials say they're cheaper to operate. And finally, in Ecuador, in a historic national referendum, Ecuadorians voted overwhelmingly overwhelmingly to ban oil drilling in Yasuni National Park in the Amazon rainforest, one of the most diverse biospheres in the world. It's hailed as a historic example of climate democracy, and it was also a victory for indigenous peoples and conservationists.
I will share that hailing. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So yesterday we were talking about I think it was the Washington Post had a story on, credit cards, balances are going up. Auto loan delinquencies are starting to tick up. And the fear is that, the economy is going to collapse because, the frame is, especially from my rightward-leaning friends, is we need a recession to tear down the successes of this administration. And this plays into some of that, I think. But as we talked about yesterday, I think what Biden is doing on the labor front, especially with the overtime ruling that they just came out with, how about getting people more money in their pockets so they can pay their bills? How come we didn't hear that as the response? But here to share some thoughts on, should we be concerned with the rise in credit card debt and auto loans and possible delinquency? That's why I've asked our good friend Morris Pearl to come share some thoughts. He's the chair of the Patriotic Millionaires, patrioticmillionaires.org, the website. Morris, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, it's great to be on your show, Rick.
So I'm sure you saw the story like everyone else. The credit cards are rising, delinquencies are happening, sky's falling evidently. You see it that way?
Yeah. The sky is still up there. Big, beautiful moon. And I was looking at this, and I was looking, credit card balances are way up. A lot more people are buying stuff because they have money. And they're paying their bills. Credit card delinquencies are about where they've been historically, and in fact are pretty low, at around 2.5–3% banks overall. That's a lot less than it was. It hit a peak of about 7%, 2008, 2009. So we have half as many delinquencies as we did then. And delinquencies are not even any higher than they were during, better times in 2019. So I'm not worried about it. People are buying more stuff, but they're buying stuff they can afford to pay for.
So why is this now a thing? Why am I seeing this, that the sky's falling? Why am I seeing that, auto loans are why are we seeing this?
Because it suddenly hit a number that had a dozen zeros in it. The number of digits in the number suddenly increased, but it's been steadily climbing for like 2 years now in a pretty steady clip. And it just suddenly went one more digit last month.
Okay.
But it wasn't even a huge thing last month. Interest rates are actually up. That might discourage some people from buying more stuff if they can't, if they've been paying by time. But banks are making plenty of money. I'm not worried about the banks, I'm not worried about more banks failing. With interest rates up, they've been raising the rates. They're charging the people who don't pay their bills every month for their credit cards. And delinquencies are not going up any higher than they were before.
So the banks will be fine. That's the message. But what about the working people?
I mean, working people have been getting screwed for years. I don't think it's been getting that much worse now. In fact, the very low end wages, I don't want to say salaries, but wages for people getting hourly wages around the minimum wage, those people have been getting raises that have been keeping up with inflation on average. People at the high end, those are the ones, it's the upper middle class people that are calling their Congress people and complaining about, the price of their avocado toast going up and stuff like that. So yeah, they make more noise because they call Congress people and they write in and they show up at fundraisers because they have time to do that. Working people who are holding down 2 or 3 jobs, they're actually catching up a bit because wages in general have been doing a little bit better than inflation over the last year or so. Not much, but a little bit.
Yeah.
But they don't have time to be talking about it all the time.
But for me, this is one of these moments where, you know, our media structures focuses on what's good for Wall Street, what's good for the banks, as where my mind goes, what's going to be best for my neighbor? You know, and for me, the idea that, you know, families are in a position that in a lot of chances they have to carry a balance because they got to put food on the table. They got to pay the electric bill. They got to get kids school shoes or you know, notebooks or stuff to get them to school, that they don't have the disposable income. They don't have the wages to keep up. So they fall back on the credit card. And one of the things that's frustrating is I haven't seen a real push to make it to where people can be as fortunate as I've been to not pay credit card interest, because we don't carry a balance. Because it's stupid to pay the bank any more money than they already take from us. But but the sad reality, and this is where I want to finish this, is most families don't have that luxury.
Yeah, I don't carry a balance either. I don't pay interest on credit cards. That's the old saying, it's very expensive to be poor. I couldn't afford it. But that's where the money trickle down theory is just wrong. Money is trickling up. When people pay their bills every month or get charged interest every month, that's how money trickles up slowly, little bit by little bit by little bit by little bit, you know, and makes the people who invest in banks and credit card companies and iPhone companies and things like that get rich. Money is trickling up in this economy. It's trickling up to the rich from the poor, from the people that work for a living. And that's why we have to do something about it.
Yeah.
That's why we have to change the way our economy works, because all the money is trickling up and eventually there's not going to be any left. And the investors, there won't be any way to make more money because no one's going to have any money because the rich people are going to have all of it. And that's not going to work for anybody.
Now, you said a moment ago, and it caught my attention, that the people who can't pay their bills end up paying higher rates because they're going to charge them fees and charge them all kinds of stuff to get more of what these folks already don't have, and then putting them deeper and deeper into the hole. I remember Bernie Sanders coming out a number of years ago saying we should put usury laws back into place and cap what these banks can charge people in interest, especially in these times. I'm curious your thoughts on something like that.
Yeah. I remember I looked at, there's these personal loan shops where you can go in with your pay stubs and they'll give you a few $1,000s and check that afternoon.
Those payday lenders.
Yeah. Those guys, I was looking at one in great detail a couple of years ago. They actually make more money from the people that default than the people that pay their loans all the time. Because what happens is they're charging somebody 20% interest. They go on for years, and every time they kind of do well, the guy calls them and says, "Oh, you've been doing so great. We can loan you another few $100." And they get another few $100. And eventually they default. But after 10 years, they've actually paid the company thousands and thousands of dollars more than they originally borrowed.
Yep.
And those are the most profitable customers they have are the ones who default eventually. And it's just not right that they're just slowly transferring all the money, from people that are working for a living and earning it to guys who, have lots of spreadsheets on their computers and extract it. And I think Sanders is right. We should have some laws controlling some of this. I mean, we do have some laws, but yeah, I'd be in favor of having more laws regulating, these high interest loans. Even the credit card loans on average have hit over 20% now. Average credit card loans in all banks, according to the St. Louis Fed.
Yeah. It's legalized loan sharking. Only they don't come break your legs. They just put you deeper into hock.
Yeah. And people pay them because they don't want their credit cards canceled. Because they need them so they can, call Uber or have a pizza delivered and do all the things you do.
Or just pay their, look, I had a friend a number of years ago who got himself into some credit card debt. ended up having to file bankruptcy because of it. And I asked him, I said, how did you run up this kind of debt? And he said, look, got to put gas in the car, got to get shoes for the kids, got to, all of these daily, expenses. My wife lost her job. It was all of this economic hardship to where eventually they got themselves 70 grand in the hole. And you have a credit card industry that just keeps feeding them, because what they know is once you file bankruptcy, they're going to get you another card because you're going to have to pay that one back.
Yeah, and once you are in debt, then every month you owe hundreds of dollars more in interest. These are talking an interest of 2.5 points a month.
Yeah.
70 grand, a month later, it's another couple of grand. And there's no way. I mean, people don't make enough money to even pay the interest, much less keep up with the principal.
So this comes back to your project, the Great Economy Project, and getting an economy that works for working people. The idea of, wealth in this country has been redistributed. It's time to redistribute it back into a way that's actually, beneficial for society, I think. And that's part of what you're doing.
Yeah, it's respect for labor, for work, for the people whose only means is selling their labor, their time. That's how they make money. I mean, that's their only way of making money for the vast majority of people. And we have to respect those people. And we have to listen to those people. And that's what we're trying to do. We're going to North Carolina. We're going to Wisconsin. We're going to Pennsylvania. And we're listening to people. And we're explaining to them why it is that they're falling farther and farther behind while people like me are just getting richer and richer and richer. And we're telling them that they can do something about it if they want to, if they contact their legislators, if they vote, if they, do whatever they can do.
Yep. You listen to the Rick
Make their
Smith
numbers
Show.
count.
We're here with Morris Pearl. Morris, the chairman of the Patriotic Millionaires, patrioticmillionaires.org, the website. If you want to check out the work that they're doing, especially on this incredible program that they're running, the Great Economy Project, highly suggested. Now, we talk about, raising taxes and having an economy that works here at home, but I guess you just testified, before like a subcommittee hearing in Brazil? Is that right?
Well, it was like a seminar. It was a group that was putting on a big conference with a seminar for legislators and think tank people and academics and whatnot. And, I was on a panel with an economics professor and the Minister of Finance and the head of Oxfam. And, we had professors from both the United States and Brazil. And basically, I was explaining to them that the problems they're having in Brazil are the same kinds of problems we have in the United States, and the same kind of problems we have in most Western democracy countries, is that the rich people have arranged it so all the taxes are paid by working people, so they just get richer and richer and richer, and people that are working for a living are falling farther behind, and they're not going to put up with it. And if they don't do something about it, they're going to have some different government that will do something about it.
Yeah, no, you're going to have civil unrest as well, which is especially in a place like Brazil.
Brazil is going to have the presidency of the G20 next year. And we're hoping President Lula, with support from other presidents like our President Biden, makes taxing wealth, having some tax system that at least addresses inequality. Even the proposals we have are not going to move billionaires out of the billionaire category into the working people category, but they're just going to take a little bit of money from the billionaires so we don't have to have all of it paid by people that work for a living.
You mean you're not going to make Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk go out and sweep streets?
No. We haven't proposed anything about that.
No. Finally, I got to get your thoughts on a potential government shutdown coming. 1st of October is what I'm hearing, maybe?
Well, yeah, that's when the official budget lasts till the end of September. That's this month, or this month starting tomorrow. And there is no budget starting October 1st. So there's no authority to spend money starting October 1st. And the problem is we've got 30 or 40 or so Republicans who don't care, who don't want to have a government, who thinks having a permanent government shutdown would be just fine because they think it's just wrong to have a government at all. They want to live like people live in, Mogadishu and have warlords, the powerful kind of running the country without any central government. And with 30 people out of 435 that think that's okay, you have to get some agreement of the other 400 people. Unfortunately, about half half Democrats and half Republicans or so, to do something. And so they're going to have to come up with some compromise to get, some Democrats and some Republicans to agree on a budget for next year and get the speaker willing to put a compromised budget on the floor of the House of Representatives. Because there's a group of Republicans who they want to get rid of the government altogether. They especially want to get rid of the FBI. They especially want to get rid of the Justice Department. They especially want to get rid of a lot of things.
Department of Education, Department of Commerce, Labor Department. Yeah, I mean, they've been very clear and open and transparent about their disdain for government. And this is where I think we the people have to kind of rise up. And I know we've been doing these 24 series kind of ticking bomb scenarios for a while. Do you think we have a shutdown in October real quick? Do you think this happens, or do you think they come up with something?
I can't imagine how they're going to get people to agree. They won't get the mainstream Republicans to jettison their 20 or 40 colleagues and pick up a bunch of Democratic votes. But that's what they have to do. They have to get the mainstream Republicans, including the speaker, to come up with a compromise that'll pick up a lot of Democratic votes.
Just crazy. But Morris, I appreciate the time as always. Great stuff, my friend.
Great to be on your show, Rick. Thank you.
Thanks so much, our good friend Morris Pearl. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So real quick, I want to give a shout out to the Wabtec employees out in Erie, Pennsylvania, who they have ratified their tentative agreement, a 70-day strike. You may remember we were there about a month and a half ago. We went out to Erie to talk with the guys who went on strike. And look, what they were fighting for was a say in their work. To say, hey, look, we want better wages, hours, conditions, absolutely. But, as the new technology comes on, we want to have a say where that work goes. And we want it to come to Erie to ensure that the jobs that we're doing are the next generation jobs. This is important stuff. This is protecting communities. And when we were there, lots of incredible community support. Also, the UAW today has filed unfair labor practices against the automakers, General Motors and Stellantis, for not bargaining in good faith or in a timely manner. This is again calling in a very pro-worker NLRB, someone who's going to side with getting this moving, getting people to the table and making them hammer out agreement. And this is where I've always said that we do need to have some parameters of time. Because the employer understands that the longer they can draw things out, the more desperate working people can be, especially if they end up going out on strike. So this is one of those things that, I think is really important. We'll see how this plays out. But I'm thrilled to see our activist unions saying, look, you know what? We're not taking it anymore. We're going to close this massive inequality gap. We're going to make sure that work pays. And, you know, I got to tell you, it goes back to me being a little kid. And I was just talking with somebody today about this. You know, I remember, and I've talked about this before a number of times. I remember as a kid, you know, that family that lived next door to us, that the husband got a job at Ford. And he would walk 4 miles every day to work and 4 miles back. But their lives got better immediately. I mean, so even as an 8-year-old growing up in the projects, you know, you saw union job, better life. There was food at the end of the month. They got better clothes, secondhand bikes, a secondhand car. Eventually, they moved out of the neighborhood and across the street into the houses across the street. Their lives got better. And for me, this is this moment to be able to grab that kind of frame, that union job, better life frame, and to really build on this. And it's these kind of fights that are important. You know, the Teamsters and UPS, those jobs are family sustaining jobs. And you ask anybody, would you want one of those? And people say yes. That's what we should be working towards. Ensuring that people have opportunity. You're willing to work hard, play by the rules, you should get ahead. It seems that simple. Now, for me, we're in this moment where inequality, and you look at the numbers, inequality is where it has been, you know, back in the not so good old days of the rip-roaring 20s, where you had extreme wealth and poverty. You know, I go back to John Edwards, and for all his problems, he was right on the frame of two Americas. He was right saying, hey, we're moving towards this direction of the haves and the have-nots. This is his telling us what is coming. And what have we done to address it? Chaos. We've gotten chaos. And the reason that we've seen this is because they don't want us talking about this stuff. Some good news coming out of Texas. They ruled the Death Star bill unconstitutional. That is a big freaking deal. Now, understand, you know, the part of the Death Star bill that I had a huge, well, there's a lot of it, but a big problem with is, you know, these local preemption laws, where, you know, cities had said, hey, we're going to have, you know, labor standards for our area. Well, the state said, no, you can't do that. We're the body. The Texas court shot that down. Also, the federal judge in Texas has stopped the state's ban on drag shows. That's got to send the right wing crazy. Yes, there will be drag in Texas. I don't care. I've been to I think I've been to one. And I was well down the road. But you know, here's where continuing to fight back is important, because these little wins are important. This is as bad as our system can seem sometimes, and as slow as justice seems. You know, what's that Dr. King quote? The arc of justice is long but bends towards justice. Yeah, I mean, that's where we're hopefully heading. So it may seem dark. You know, all the stories, all the news I see is you know, attacking Biden for being old or not taking the stairs, or you know, just crazy right-wing. You've got a state senator in Georgia saying he's going to draw his rifle and ignite a civil war. I mean, how much crazier can it get? All because they're going to defend someone that they don't want to defend in court. They want to use all of the anchors of power. They want to use all of the things that they can do out in public, but they don't want to defend it in court. You know why? It's indefensible what Trump did. It's indefensible what these fake electors did. It's indefensible what the very best people did or tried on January 6th. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com.
Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1921. That was the day the Battle of Blair Mountain raged in Logan County, West Virginia. Members of the United Mine Workers of America were attempting to organize the minefields in the southern part of the state. The efforts to bring workers to union was met with violent resistance. The miners armed themselves and marched south. As many as 10,000 miners joined the march. They met armed company men at Blair Mountain. In the battle that ensued, 1 million rounds were fired. The mine owners even hired private planes to drop bombs on Union miners. The U.S. Army intervened and the battle ended. Despite not being successful in their march, the bloody battle brought national attention to the violence in the coal fields. But that was not the last battle for Blair Mountain. In 2011, there was a proposal to bring mountaintop removal mining to Blair Mountain. This type of mining blasts off large chunks of a mountain surface to get at the coal seams below. Protesters stood against the proposal. They argued it would be environmentally devastating to the area. They also argued that it would blast away one of the most important sites of labor history in the nation. Some coal miners took exception to the protests. In a CNN documentary on the conflict, one union miner said, quote, "Mountaintop removal is what built this house, sends that little girl to school, provides insurance for my wife." But another miner joined in the protest against removal. He told CNN that miners had been, quote, "brainwashed to think, oh, I can't have a job unless it's a mountaintop removal job." In 2014, the state prohibited surface mining at Blair Mountain. For now, but that is subject to change. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
The people are revolting, in the very best meaning of that word. An inspiring example of people rising up against a trifecta of economic, cultural, and political oppression has just come to us from a community of seemingly powerless people living in a very isolated place. Long exploited, lied to, disrespected, and robbed, they revolted, daring to take on the biggest, richest, most politically connected industrial power on the globe, Big Oil. Astonishingly, after a decade of protesting, organizing, coalition building, suing, petitioning, and otherwise resolutely rebelling against injustice, these tenacious people just won an inspiring grassroots victory over Big Oil profiteering. One reason you probably haven't heard about it is that it didn't happen in any of the usual centers of media focus, but in the Amazonian rainforest of Ecuador. Also, this revolt was not led by some brand-name environmental group or charismatic political honcho, but by the Tagari and Taromanani tribes and other indigenous Warani people living in the rich biodiversity of Ecuador's Usani National Park. Directly challenging the exigent crisis of climate change, the Warani rallied the region's young people into a potent political force. They successfully organized behind a national referendum to 1. Ban oil drilling in the region, 2. Compel the profiteers to remove their wells and pipelines, and 3. Pay for remediation and reforestation. Significantly, they specifically called for leaving oil in the ground so it would not add to climate destruction. And the proposed ban was binding, unable to be overturned by future lobbyists and officials. This is Jim Hightower saying a resounding 58% of Ecuadorians said yes. As a Warani leader noted, this is the day the planet started to win.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as we've been talking about, inequality is something that's ripping this country apart, and the sooner we address it, whether it's the patriotic millionaires and their great economy project, talking about taxes, especially taxing the rich, which I am fully supportive of, or, again, something else I'm fully supportive of, getting people to join and form unions and organize to fight for better wages, hours, conditions, whether it's any of that, it's the way forward, which is why I am thrilled to see our friends over at Capital in Maine with a new project. It's the Striking Back Project, asking the question, can American workers disrupt inequality? You can find stuff at that over at capitalandmain.com. And I've got Tracy McMillan here. She is the project editor of the Striking Back series, of which I hope to get a whole bunch of people to come explain to us how we do strike back and strike down inequality. Tracy, thanks for taking time for us.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
So tell me about this new project. I'm really excited. I don't know if you can tell, really excited about this.
Yeah, so I mean, Capital Maine has been doing some great sort of nonprofit investigative news work for almost a decade now, and they were able to pull together resources to fund a 2-year series of articles looking very specifically at worker organizing. So striking back, right, is not really, my work is not to sort of bring out stories of just workers getting treated badly, right, which of course happens all the time, but to really spend time digging into what workers are doing across the country to improve the places that they work and sort of what the limitations on those improvements are in terms of sort of government policy, corporate opposition, even just sort of really lax labor law enforcement, that sort of stuff. And so really looking at like, if, part of the solution here is to have people coming together and fighting for change, and particularly in their workplaces, what does that look like? How does that work? What are the models that are working?
No, I mean, I've been talking about the fact that the Biden administration right now, and look, I don't want to sound like too much of a fanboy or cheerleader, but I think they're the Labor Department and the NLRB. I think what they're doing right now is going to be extremely helpful in helping tackle inequality by giving people the ability to fight for better wages, hours, conditions, increasing that threshold before you're a supervisor to work 100 hours a week. I think there's a lot of good stuff, and I think we need more people telling those stories.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, I am, as an investigative journalist by training, I am not somebody who is a fangirl of any institution really, but it has been really interesting to see what's happened at the NLRB and DOL in the Biden administration. Like, I think that particularly there was the CEMEX decision just last week, right? That now if employers are found to have been conducting unfair labor practices, the NLRB will just recognize the union.
Yep.
I mean,
I asked the question back when the Bessemer vote was happening at Amazon. All the unfair labor charges, all of the illegal firings, all of the stuff. Why couldn't you just impose? You say, look, sit down and bargain now. You screwed up. You had your shot. You had your bite at the apple. You blew it. It's time to now sit down and pay the piper. And now we're actually doing that. And I think it's a darn good thing.
Yeah, I think it's going to be seeing what the ripple effect of that is. Like, as with all these union campaigns that are going on, I think is fascinating, right? I mean, just for me, it's really exciting to see that as somebody who's followed labor, for 3 decades, to understand what the potential for change is there is really important. So I know that, we're really interested in some of the organizing that's going on with Trader Joe's, like that independent union has already filed under the CEMEX decision. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens there. And I know actually a lot of the other stories that we've been sort of starting to develop and keeping an eye on, unfair labor practices are so endemic whenever, folks announce for a union, seeing how that decision gets applied, how retroactively it can be applied, what that means going forward is going to be really interesting for us.
No, and that's the kind of reporting and deep dive journalism that we need in this country. I tell this story all the time. I'm old enough to remember when newspapers used to have labor reporters. And they used to have a labor page. Every newspaper's got a business page. We all know what Wall Street wants. We all know what Wall Street demands. But we used to have a page where workers had a voice, where issues that were important to working people was in the local newspaper. Those are all long gone. They've eviscerated all that. So to hear that you're actually going to start doing some of this stuff is really, as I said, I think really exciting.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, we're really excited to get going with it. I feel like we kicked off pretty well with the stories we had this week about like a worker center in Minnesota that's working with local building trades to sort of remake monitoring and enforcement there. Obviously building trades can provide really decent careers for folks and like stable middle-class income, but almost 90% of construction workers in this country are not in a union. And so the partnership there between traditional unions, right, that already have that organization down, and a largely immigrant workforce where there's a lot of issues around documentation for being able to work legally in the country, right? Coming together and figuring out, well, how do we make all of this better? Because that's going to help everybody, right? Because I think in the past, like unions history, right, there's sometimes been some difficulty dealing with non-union workers, right? And so to see folks joining in common cause there, for us, was a story we really wanted to be able to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that there are any unionized residential home builders in this country. I don't actually know that there are any anymore. There used to be, and this is where most of your construction workers are, and most of them get abused. And I think it's important to point out, as you guys did in this piece from Minnesota, how this stuff plays out, because then it gives us the ability, I think, to have actual substantive policy discussions on how we move forward and ensure that those jobs are decent paying, have decent benefits, and are safe.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I think to counter the idea, I certainly, I've done more in my own reporting, I've done more work around sort of agricultural labor, right? But I think that there tends to be this narrative of like, oh, well, those are bad jobs, but you can't really do anything about it. It's just so complicated. And it's like, it's not actually that hard.
No.
Like, we could do it if we decided to. And like, here are folks, who don't have the resources of government. They don't have the resources of big corporations, and they're figuring out how to make that work.
Yeah.
And they're drawing on really important work that's already happened, right, in the Florida fields with tomato workers, with worker-driven social responsibility, all that, right, like keeps layering in. But I think it's really important.
No, I mean, you think about the good jobs today. You think about the good working class, blue collar jobs of today, the auto workers, steel workers, unionized truck drivers that are left, the UPS drivers. Those weren't good jobs until they were union jobs. And those were crummy jobs. My grandparents used to tell me how bad things used to be. In fact, my grandfather used to shovel coal off the back of a coal truck for 17 cents an hour, 16 hours a day, 7 days a week during the winter, and still not have enough money to put a roof over their heads. When those became union jobs, those became solid middle class, one income, family sustaining jobs. So you can't tell me that these jobs can't be good jobs, because I know they can be.
Yeah. I mean, actually, I once had a really interesting conversation with a high school class in Coachella, right down in California, in that valley, a lot of farm workers there. So I was talking to a high school class there, and I had done some reporting on farm work, and they said, hey, like, you were doing some farm labor. Would you ever go back to the fields? And I was like, well, no, but my grandpa works in auto factories, and those weren't good jobs to start with either. People would work in the fields if they were safe and they were paid decently, like that's sort of what the difference is. And yeah. I think unions and just any kind of worker organization, right, can be really powerful forces for that.
No, anytime you give workers an ability to somewhat level the playing field, it's never going to be perfectly even, but just a somewhat of what the National Labor Relations Act understood, that the employer has all the power, has all the rights. It just gave workers a little bit of a leg up. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Tracy McMillan. She's a project editor over at the Striking Back series for Capital in Maine, capitalinmaine.com, the website. I'm really looking forward to this series, asking the question, can American workers disrupt inequality? Because I believe inequality is what is really tearing us apart. I mean, we've got all this red hat, blue hat nonsense that's going on and all these culture wars. And I think at the heart of it is the fact that, I grew up believing that if you work hard, play by the rules, you get ahead. That getting ahead part hasn't been around for a very long time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that certainly the American economy, right? We've really let most of there were a lot of buffers sort of built in the post-war era, and we've let those recede, right? So we don't really have them anymore, and now more and more workers are sort of feeling what happens when you don't have those protections, right? And obviously, a lot of that's about big structural economic change, right? Because the jobs that were covered by the NLRA and all those protections under the New Deal, right? Those jobs have all become much less, they're not as common as they were in that era. And all the jobs that were excluded from the NLRA, which, people talk a lot about agriculture and domestic labor and like the terrible racial history around that, which is really important. It's also true that almost all service was just de facto was out of I don't know if that's the right term, but like service work was excluded, right? Hospital workers were not included. Launderers weren't included. Hotels weren't included. So all these jobs that have come to really dominate a service economy, they were never included in those protections, right? So all those industries, as they grew up, right, through the 20th century, were predicated on the idea that you wouldn't have to pay workers very much, right? And so now we're, as a society, we're paying the cost for having left those folks out.
So let me ask you on this front: is the focus going to be, story by story? Are we looking at making policy prescription? What's the focus going to be so folks will have an idea of what they can expect when they go over to capitalandmaine.com to check out the Striking Back series? What's the guiding focus, if that makes sense?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think for us the guiding focus is what are the models that workers can use to really address the problems of inequality in our country. And I will say, I think the default assumption is that, like, when you talk about unions and inequality, we just mean economic inequality. But for me, I think it's really important that we're looking at racial inequality, we're looking at gender inequality, both of which, by the way, right, are really like those inequities are much more modest when you have unions involved, right? So like the racial wealth gap, for instance, between Black and white families that are union and non-union, it's if you're a Black family in a union household, your racial wealth gap is half as the size as if you were in a non-union, right? So it's like better. It doesn't get rid of the gap between Black and white, which is something we need to be working on and taking seriously, right? But there's really strong arguments to make for unions, not just for economic inequality, but broader social equity as well. And I think for us, that's really important. As we get oriented with the series, right, I think we'll be looking to doing multi-part stories and more investigative digs than we're doing to sort of kick off. Right now, I think the main thing is to just make sure we're getting out some good stories about unions that look at not just the union movement, but the worker movement, right? So like, I spent a lot of time in Detroit. And so like General Baker here is a big guy from the Radical Dodge movement, right, in the 70s, right, where it's like, there's the union movement and then there's the labor movement. And labor movement's a lot bigger, right, because it's everybody who works and is trying to make change, right? And so I think for us, that's something that I'm really keeping an eye on. And I also come out of like a policy reporting background, so I'm certainly interested in that, but we're going to be working to figure out sort of what's the right spot for us, because there's a lot of folks doing great journalism. A lot of people are going to be covering labor. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We need to figure out what we can do that other places aren't going to be able to pay attention to.
No, I mean, labor is the new black. I mean, the reality is there's a lot of, look, when we were doing this program 18 years ago, there wasn't a lot in this space. Now there's a lot of people doing this, and that is a good thing. The more voices we can get out there to promote worker power and the ability to make better lives, the better we're all going to be, I think. So in looking at this, when you're talking about the difference between the unions and the worker power movement, where I guess where's the focus going to be? Because there's a tension there, I believe, or can be.
I mean, there can be. I think for us, worker centers are as much a part of labor coverage as are traditional unions, right? So that's one of the reasons we wanted to kick off with this Minnesota story, as well as, there's also a story about the effort to organize a union at Delta among the flight attendants, machinists, and the ramp agents. Because I think there are a lot of workers that don't necessarily think of unions as being for them. I think often that correlates with sort of race and citizenship and stuff like that. And that doesn't mean those folks aren't part of the labor movement. It means that they're part of a different part of it, right? And so we want to make sure that in our coverage, as in our society, right, that we understand that everybody is part of this, right? And it only works if we all join together and sort of work that way. So certainly we're keeping an eye, like for me as the editor, I really want to be looking at what are folks doing that's replicable, right? So is there something somebody's doing that's really innovative and interesting that might work for other unions, that might work for other communities? Are there interesting collaborations between unions and community, political coalitions, anything like that? I think that's interesting. What are the ripple effects of changes in policy? So this stuff with CIMEX, right, and the NLRB, that's huge. Right. So if that all of a sudden creates a sea change, we want to be able to document and sort of show that that is working, or if it's not, right, if there's a sufficient and effective pushback from sort of the employers on this, and they're able to block that from actually changing the game, right? We want to be able to document that. I mean, and we are definitely interested in breaking news and doing investigative work, and certainly like we are interested in stories about union busting and sort of malfeasance and that sort of stuff. But the main thing is to sort of take a little bit of a structural look at it. And so it's not just like, is there a cool union campaign, but like, what's the bigger thing we can learn about building power from a specific effort or campaign somewhere? So for us, we're always going to be trying to pull back and take a bigger picture, which I think ultimately is something Capitol Maine has been doing really well for a decade, right? And so I think for me, it's exciting to jump in and try and figure out, how do we do this if our focus is just like, what are workers and unions doing? What are the constraints on what they're able to do? And how do we make it so that we can build sort of a movement that can push for more equity for folks?
Well, I've got a new website that I am bookmarking that I will be checking daily, capitolinmaine.com/striking-back-series. We'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at the Striking Back series over at Capitol in Maine. I am looking forward to having you guys come back on and share some of this incredible work. But good on you. I got great hope for you.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Rick. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks so much. Appreciate the time. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Gonna take a quick break. Right back to wrap things up. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1991. 3,500 buses rolled into Washington, D.C. They were loaded with protesters, there to participate in Solidarity Day. The AFL-CIO organized the event to coincide with the Labor Day weekend. They issued a statement, "Why We March," outlining labor's demands. The purpose of the day was to bring attention to the concerns of the nation's working people, especially over health care. Other reasons for the march included a call for more public works programs. Another major demand was the end to permanent replacement of striking workers by scabs. Bernie Dinkin, Secretary-Treasurer of the Amalgamated Clothing and Textile Workers Union in Philadelphia, explained, "One of the main purposes for us going down is to let our friends know, our friends in the Democratic Party who are sitting on their laurels, that if they do not support anti-scab legislation, we will vote against them, no matter what they've done in the past." The most important aim of the event was to show worker strength and solidarity. A similar showing of solidarity had taken place in the nation's capital 10 years before. After President Reagan fired striking air traffic controllers, a September 1981 rally had drawn more than 250,000 people. The 1991 action brought out similar numbers. Despite the 95-degree weather, tens of thousands converged on the nation's capital. They came from across the nation and 30 countries. 100 buses and a specially chartered train made the trip from Philadelphia. Noticeable among the crowd were members of the United Steelworkers Union with their gold and blue shirts. 180 different labor, religious, and civil rights groups stood up on that day for the rights of working people.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. In talking about inequality, and again, this is one of those topics that I could spend days, ranting and raving about, because the sad reality is what's happened over the years is we've allowed the very wealthy to basically rob us blind, and we've allowed the Republicans to destroy our social safety net. And what tattered bit of a social safety net we have, they've put massive roadblocks in front of and done all kinds of really screwy stuff. And I look at Mississippi. Today I saw a story that the governor there, Tate Reeves, has revealed that there's some text messages with his brother Todd and Brett Favre, who you may remember the whole Brett Favre thing, where there was a bunch of TANF money. the money that's supposed to go to feeding poor people ended up in Brett Favre's bank account, like $1.1 million in TANF money that was given to him to record ads and give speeches. Now you go, is it Brett Favre's fault that the idiots in Mississippi gave him this money? I don't know, and I'm not making a judgment on that. If he did know that this was welfare money, shame on him. And also, I guess this welfare money went to building like a volleyball arena at his alma mater, and you go, why? We're going to build a volleyball court and not feed children? What sense does that make? But this story breaks because, I guess now the time has passed where you can just throw this stuff out and, well, it's over. It's done with. Because Favre, if you remember, was one of 38 people who was named in a civil lawsuit by the Mississippi Department of Health and Human Services, I believe it was. Evidently, a state audit, and this is the part where you go, the block grant people I love. They're so cute. Because we know what happens with block grants, especially programs for the poor, they get stolen from. Evidently, $77 million in welfare funds was misspent. $77 million. Of which, 6.1 went to Brett Favre and Brett Favre's endeavors. $5 million was the athletic thing at wherever he went to college. Now he has paid back he's paid back the money that he got because it was a PR nightmare. But my mind went into this weird place because this was a civil lawsuit. You see where I'm going with this? There were no criminal charges that I could find. Why weren't these people thrown in jail? All of them. Now, a couple of them were indicted. 6 pled guilty. But my mind went, what about all of these people? Because think about this. And I was going through this, I was walking this through my mind. What if you signed up for TANF benefits that maybe you underestimated your income and you got a little bit of a benefit that you weren't entitled to? Do you have any idea what they would do to you? I mean, this is, it's draconian penalties for the poor. As Morris Pearl said earlier, it's expensive to be poor in this country. But we don't make enough of locking up these criminals who stole $77 million. And you go, well, it's just, it's just money. No, it's not just $77 million, man. It was kids like me, living in poverty at the end of the month where there's no food in the cupboards. It's the families who didn't get these resources, who didn't get the help that they need, that we said as a society, we're going to make this helping hand available. Now, you can argue, well, we shouldn't have these programs, and I would not disagree in every case. I'm not a fan of handout programs. Never have been. Not a fan. I think welfare programs are not great. We should have jobs programs. I'm a big supporter of people going to work, getting the therapeutic qualities of a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. But we don't have that society right now. I know Republicans want to have work requirements. Yeah, they want to have work requirements with no jobs. I lived in a neighborhood where you weren't on the bus line. There was no way to get to those jobs because they put those jobs out in the suburbs, especially the decent ones. So for me, this is another one of these moments where the wealthy keep getting wealthier. They game the system to where even the things that we allocate for poor people end up in their pockets, and they're never really held accountable. My hope is, my eternal hope is always, that we finally wake up and we start holding these people to account. And I would love to have seen 38 perp walks. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you find your favorite podcast, you'll find ours. I appreciate you being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.